Welcome back to Les Schwab Tire Center's Outdoor GPS, presented by Fisherman's Marine and Outdoor. Now it's time for your weekend tech tip, brought to you by Chevy Silverado.
And we're going to stay on that little bit of a tech tip topic, dummy, with Bob Capka, Bugling Bob. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the bow off air, or right before we cut away. I mentioned about your sight, shooting, getting sighted in using the same rangefinder.
That's
and
important.
you mentioned during the break, like that makes, that's important. Explain to people why that is important.
So I've been shooting Broadhead League, where we shoot broadheads at 3D animals for a month here, and I'm in a group of 4 or 5 guys. We all have rangefinders. They're all getting slightly different readings.
They do.
So I don't want somebody to tell me, hey, that's 37.5 yards. I want to see it on my rangefinder so I know what my bow does with what my rangefinder is actually reading.
Right.
So it's important that you get out there and range some stuff, different distances. Shoot those half yards. It's not always 20 yards,
Exactly.
30 yards.
Absolutely.
I mean, shoot 36, shoot 42,
Right.
the different ranges. And, trust your rangefinder, not your buddies.
Now, there's always going to be the situation where if you're the one holding the bow and you got somebody that's with you, they grab their rangefinder and they give you a number. Well, like Bob just mentioned, these are not always the same. I have 2 of these 100% the same exact rangefinder, and the other one reads a yard or 2 differently than what this one does. At 20 yards, at 30 yards, at 40 yards, especially at 40 yards, for crying out loud. Yeah. You're talking 4 to 6 inches of variant when you're talking about that. So this bow is sighted into this rangefinder. The other bow, my V3X, is sighted in to the other one. Now you might go, well, that's just crazy. Well, it is, but it's just the way it is, okay? Those are just little things that will make the difference. And, we talked prior to the show that the 1560 pin, for anybody that, is really doing this, the 1560 pin, that's not what you're hunting with. You're hunting with your 20, 30, and 40. 50 and 60 is, holy crap, something bad happened, or you might have a chance to poke another hole when there's already one in there, right? So, some people will argue that, but anybody that's been doing it for a long time, not. They're going to go, you're right. So, but the variant with that 1 or 2 yards off at 30, 40, 50 yards, it's significant.
It can be. And, that being said, a lot of guys are capable of those longer shots, and that's fine too. I just know in my career and my guiding career and everything, including my brothers, our shots are always top pin.
Right.
I tell that to people every year.
Sure.
We'll talk in February. You're going to ask me how it went. I'm going to say top pin.
Yeah.
I call elk, so it's usually in the timber. It's usually a close shot.
Right.
I only have a 3-pin sight. That's what I grew up with.
Sure.
I don't care to shoot any longer than that.
Right.
So, but that being said, lots of guys can shoot a heck of a lot farther, and they do just fine.
Yeah.
So, just know your limits is what I would recommend. Know your limits.
Take his word, please. I can shoot out to 60 yards very consistently. It's not an option. It's just simply, in my mind, it's just not an option.
I'm not worried about hitting the spot at 60 yards. For me, I worry about penetration.
Oh, absolutely.
And, deflections and
They're
things like that.
big animals, especially elk. Deer, yes, different, different species are different things. You mentioned also, though, about releases. Let's talk about that real quick.
Okay, so releases are super important.
They need to be maintained as well.
They do need to be maintained. Most releases have lifetime warranties, and if you feel like anything's sticky in there or releasing early on you, it may need an adjustment, it may need to get sent back, but make sure your trigger's functioning correctly. Doesn't matter what you use, what brand, what style. There's trigger finger releases, there's thumb releases. I'm personally way more consistent with the trigger, but that's just me. In archery, you talk to 10 guys, you hear 10 different things.
Absolutely.
I'm just going with what works for me.
Sure.
Triggers are super reliable. It's attached to my wrist. I'm not going to lose it. One thing I like to show people when they're putting these things on is to always creep up on your trigger like that before you adjust your strap here, because your finger needs to be right in that spot right there.
Sure.
Not stretched out where you're getting it with the tip of your finger. You want to be curled over and getting that crease, and it's going to come off perfectly clean. So, and again, make sure there's no sharp spots. Don't want to scuff up your D-loop and get punched in the face or anything. So yeah, and it's always good to have a backup. And one thing I learned this year, this is important. If you have a backup release, try to have the exact same release.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
They vary. Your anchor point will change. The peep sight won't line up.
Right.
I highly recommend, we all have a backup, and it's usually, oh, it's my old one from, you know, the 90s, or, you know, we carry a backup release, which is smart, but have you shot it?
Right.
Does everything line up right? I mean, it's something you really need to check. So I recommend, if you're going to have a spare release, shoot 2 of the exact same thing.
Makes sense. So. Keep everything the same every time. I guess it kind of falls back down to the same theory with shooting your practice arrows with a dead lighted knot, because everything is the same.
Got to be consistent.
Now, along with that, I am not a caller. Kenny, I love you. I can call cows, but I think most people can with enough practice, right? But you do classes over at Archers. You've only got a couple left for those that are trying to get themselves tuned on that as well. You can help them just like you can with the bow, but you can help them become better with their elk call.
For sure. I've been calling elk since the late 80s.
Yeah.
I've been teaching these classes for decades now, up at the guide school in Montana and then over at Archers Afield. I love helping people with their calling. I know how exciting it is to call in bulls, and it's just, you don't have to be an expert caller. You have to be able to make some basic sounds, basic squeals, basic cow calls. But I can help you sound better, first of all, and then the key is then knowing what to do.
Right.
Okay, so I have one class on calling, making sounds. I have another class on tactics.
Sure. Knowing when to call, when to shut up.
Yeah, because when you need to create an encounter. I can listen to 3 or 4 elk bugle in a canyon, but what's going to create that encounter?
Right.
How come that one's not running over to that one? Why aren't these ones fighting? You know, what's going on? So there's things you can do to create that encounter, and stuff that's worked for me in the past. I like to share that with people, and hopefully they'll have the same kind of success.
If you think that you might have an issue with your bow, I know that you guys are slammed. They're one of the very few places that you can trust to take your bow and have it worked on, right? Where they'll, I mean, flat out take the thing apart if necessary and do it the right way. There's not a lot of places that can do that. You can trust Bob. You can trust the folks over there at Archers. What do and if they want to participate in one of the classes that they offer, they just call you up, set it up.
Yeah, just give us a call.
And then head in.
Or just swing in with your bow. You know, if we're not that busy, a lot of stuff, it doesn't have to be overwhelming or complex. A lot of times, a guy will come in for a paper tune, I'll look at his bow, you make a slight adjustment, shoot a shot, it's a bullet hole, hey, no charge, you know, you're good to go.
Right.
If a bow fights you a little bit and maybe needs to some maintenance and that sort of thing, yeah, I might need it for a day. But we're really on top of it. We've got some really good tuners there at the shop that,
no doubt,
you know, that help me. And so we just, you know, we're staying on top of stuff, so we got time. I mean, definitely bring in your bow if you're having any kind of issues or concerns.
We're going to cut to a break. When we come back, we've got your Pikeman'll reward numbers, and I'm making you hang out with me.
You got it.
All right, we'll be right back, everyone.